But, Mika, let's start as we hit the top of the hour here with the revelations from the Justice Department's investigation into former President Donald Trump. We're learning new details from an overnight DOJ filing in response to Trump's request for an independent review of the materials that would be known as a special master following the search of Mar-a-Lago earlier this month. The DOJ argues appointing a special master, quote, is unnecessary and would significantly harm important governmental interests, including national security interests. The DOJ points out government review teams already have finished their work, and a third party reviewing the documents only would impede its ongoing criminal investigation. The 36-page filing also reveals the Justice Department sought a search warrant for Mar-a-Lago after obtaining evidence that highly classified documents were likely moved and hidden, and that Trump's representatives had falsely claimed all sensitive material already had been returned. The DOJ filing states, quote, the government also developed evidence that government records likely were concealed and removed from the storage room, and that efforts were likely taken to obstruct the government's investigation. It goes on to state 3 classified documents that were not located in boxes, but rather were located in the desks in the 45 office were also sealed, end quote. The DOJ also included a picture, this photograph, of the documents seized during the FBI's search of the former president's Florida estate, several of which clearly are marked top secret. In all, the filing says more than 100 unique classified documents were seized, and some of the documents were so sensitive, FBI agents and DOJ attorneys needed additional security clearance just to review them. The DOJ filing reveals the FBI recovered twice as many classified documents than were returned by the Trump team, casting doubt over their claim that there had been a diligent search following the grand jury subpoena in May. Joining us now, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, and NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Good morning to you both. Ryan, I'll start with you. You've been poring through this document. It came in just before midnight last night, 36 pages in all, and makes a pretty clear case in response to the request from Trump's team for a special master and independent review of the seized documents, that they had grounds to go in and look. And in fact, they said, here are some of the receipts, particularly with that photograph.
That's right. And to me, one of the most interesting things is when it filled in more of the details about exactly what happened in June, because, as you sort of laid out, there was this initial boxes of documents, 15 documents that were turned, or 15 boxes that were turned over at the beginning of the year, 14 of which those boxes had classified information in them. Then after that grand jury subpoena was issued in late May and executed in early June, you had a situation where there were a number of more documents that were turned over to the government. And that's what we learned more details about last night, in addition to on top of all this other information, was that there were 17 documents in there that were marked top secret, 38 unique documents that bore classification markings. So that's really an interesting component of this, because in response to this grand jury subpoena, the Trump officials turned over a bunch of documents that they weren't supposed to have, setting aside the fact that they weren't supposed to have any presidential records, which are supposed to be guided by the Presidential Records Act and in the possession of the National Archives. They turned over a bunch of documents that were top secret. Even after that, 2 months later, lo and behold, after the FBI actually searched Mar-a-Lago, they found all of these additional documents and all of these, including in Trump's own office, and including that in this filing last night was the detail that some of those documents were found directly next to those passports. The passports thing is actually really interesting, because there's a lot of controversy about the seizure of Trump's passport. But in fact, it actually does suggest that Donald Trump was deeply involved in this, because they were found in his personal desk and they were found right next to his passports. Really,
yeah, there are top secret documents casually stashed in the desk drawers, Peter Baker. And what this filing from the Justice Department lays out plainly is not only were the documents taken from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, not only were they concealed there and hidden, but then that the attorneys for Donald Trump, that team, lied to the Justice Department, lied to the FBI that it had given everything. Yes, you came, we answered your request. It took us a long time to answer it, but here's everything. It wasn't everything.
That's right. It wasn't everything. The document that was signed by Trump's lawyer, it's believed to be Christina Bobb, has been redacted from the document, says a diligent search was made, and that based on all the information provided to her, everything had been turned over. Now, Whether she knew that was untrue or whether that was she was in fact herself misled, obviously we don't know. But that document's not true. It's not true that everything was turned over, not even close. And I think that's what's really important about this filing last night, which emphasizes something that we also saw in the last filing that was released last week, which is that this is not just a question about whether laws were violated in terms of the handling of presidential documents, much less secret documents. It's an investigation into possible criminal obstruction. It's not that, oh, gosh, we just took some documents we shouldn't have had, or we have documents we disagree on whether he's allowed to have it, or he says he's just declassified and therefore it's okay for him to have it. What the Justice Department is saying here in this document that was filed last night is that either the president, former president of the United States, or the people around him potentially violated the law by trying to hide and keep the government from knowing what was going on. That is a whole different level of crime if it's something that the Justice Department decides to pursue. And I think that's the that brings this to a whole bigger level.
Okay, so Ryan, a question for you about what we know so far, and stop me if it's something we don't know. We do know that Donald Trump had these documents, and he has not denied that he had these documents. Am I correct?
No, yeah, I think you're right. He has made some assertion that he declassified some of the documents in regards to quote unquote Russiagate, but I don't think he has a bigger excuse for having all of these classified documents, which is clear from the filing are not really just solely about Russiagate. There's a ton of information included in it.
So it's also true that there were issues and delays in returning these documents. So if those two points are true, is that in itself any type of violation right there? Just what we know so far.
It is, but I think that, when you're making a prosecutorial decision, typically in these cases, there has to be some sort of aggravating factor. And I think that the aggravating factor here, which the Department of Justice's memo last night speaks to, is the idea that there was interference with an ongoing investigation. And that seems to be what they're solely focused on. There was some, I think that getting back the documents was an important component of this investigation, but clearly from the filing last night, that's not solely what this is about. This wasn't only about getting these documents that belong to the government back. This was about an obstruction of justice investigation because Donald Trump had all of that warning. He had ample warning over months and months that these documents did not belong to him. Even after receiving a grand jury subpoena, he continued to hold on to a boatload of classified documents. So it's pretty damning, not really indictment, but memo overall. But figuratively, it's a pretty damning indictment of Donald Trump's handling of this classified information, Mika.